Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and welcome to episode 4 of building a high-end 450 size quadcopter. In this episode, I'm going to be adding a new model to the Taranis, as well as adding custom sounds, and we are also going to bind it to the X8R receiver, ready to set up the Pixhawk flight controller. Before we do that though, I'm going to load in some custom sounds. So what you need to do is when you switch your Taranis on, you need to hold the bottom two trims inwards. And then when you turn the Taranis on, it goes into bootloader mode. You can then plug your USB lead into the back of the Taranis, which was provided in the box, and plug it into the computer. This will show up on your computer as a removable device. The next thing you want to do is go onto Google and type in RC groups and amber sounds. This is a sound pack that has been specifically created for the Taranis. The file downloads as an archive, so you want to use a program like WinRAR to extract it. Once you have done that, you will end up with a folder called Sounds. What you want to do with that Sounds folder is copy all the files that are inside it into the Sounds folder on the removable drive that has popped up when we plug the Taranis in. Before you do that though, I suggest you take a copy of the entire SD card as backup, but I haven't had a problem since. It's only if you want to revert back to the original sounds. Now we have done that, we are ready to set up our model. You just want to turn the Taranis off and unplug the USB lead. When you switch it back on, your default OpenTX sound will have changed.
Welcome to Taranis.
Okay, so let's set up our first model on the Taranis, but before we do that, I'm going to take you through each one of the buttons and show what they do. So the first one is the menu button. If you short press that, it takes us to our model memory list. You can see here that we can scroll down and up, and if we scroll up, it'll take us right to the end, and you can see there that we can have 60 models in total. Now, I've only got one model here at the moment, and I have changed the name of that, but we'll get to that in a bit. So to exit out of there, you've got the exit button, and that takes us back to the front screen. Now, if you long press the menu button, that takes us into a radio setup screen, and you've got things like the date and time and stuff like that. We don't really need to change anything there. Actually, we went into this setup page when we added the S3 switch. If you fast press the page button, it takes us through the different pages. You can see there that they move up. And also, if you long press the page button, it takes you backwards like that. And of course, to exit out of that menu completely, we press exit. So to create our new model, I'm going to fast press the menu button, and that brings us to the model selection screen. And you can see here I've already renamed the first model. When you get this, you already have one model set up there, but of course you can create multiple ones, and if you want to do that, you just hold down the enter button and create model. But I'm just going to press exit there because we already have this one. So if we hover over that one using the up and down buttons and then fast press page, it's going to bring us into the first model setup screen. You can see here the pages are numbered, the same as the other menu that we went in. So the model name, I have changed it to DJI Pix because this is the DJI 450 with the Pixhawk, and to change that you just press enter over the top and you can change the keys like that. So once you have named it however you want to name it, press exit, and that's going to highlight the whole thing again. One thing that I have changed is the model image. That is literally just the model that displays here. You can make your own. You can get so nerdy with this transmitter, but I draw the line at making my own images. Maybe you think differently. But anyways, let's go back into there and the first page. So I haven't messed with any of this, but what we do need to change is a couple of things down here. So I've just gone to the bottom of the screen, thereby pressing up. We need to change the failsafe mode to no pulses, and that is because that's the setting that we want for the Pixhawk's failsafe to kick in. You also want to change the channel range from 1 to 16. It was 1 to 8 as the default, and also the mode D16. And that is all that we need to change on that page. So I'm going to do a page forward, and again, and this is flight modes. We'll come back to this because the first thing that we want to see is the inputs there. So for the inputs, we want to make sure that the controls are in this order. So throttle, aileron, elevator, and rudder. And the way that we do that is we press enter on the one that it's hovering over, and then hold down the enter button, press enter again to edit it, and then change the source to whichever control it needs to be. In this case, it's throttle. So you press enter there, and then it starts flashing. Use the up and down arrows, and it will change it. So I'm going to press exit out of that. So once you've got them all in that order, the next thing you want to do is add the S3 switch onto channel 5. When you get this from new, it will say 05 there, just like it says 06 there. And of course, you will hold down the enter key and it will let you change things there, rename it and everything. But I'm just going to exit out of there to show you what I have already created. I'm actually going to delete that one because there's nothing on there at the moment. So delete that one. So for the channel 5 mode, that's going to be our flight mode switch. So I'm going to press enter in there and edit it. So I have changed the input mode to mode because it means flight mode, and I have changed the source to S3, which is the S3 switch, which we added in the previous video. You can see there that it also says custom curve. Don't worry about that. We're going to add that in a bit. So I'm going to exit out of there. Okay, so once I have done that, we are going to be skipping channel 6, and we're going to go on to channel 7, which you can see I have called auto, which is short for auto tune. If we long press enter in there and press edit, I've changed the name to auto. But also, if we go over to the source there and press enter, it'll start flashing. Now, what you can do is you can move the switch that you want it to change to.
Auto-tune.
So you can see there, and if I move this one, it'll change to this one there. Now that doesn't work for the S3 switch. We have to manually select the S3 switch. I think maybe because it was designed not to have it as standard. But for all the other switches, you can flick them and it's going to change it there. And we don't need to save anything. All we need to do is press exit. So that's all our inputs sorted. So if we press page now, that's going to bring us to the mixer. Now, any of those inputs that we just created are not going to work unless we also set it up on the mixer. Okay, so these ones can all stay the same: aileron, elevator, throttle, rudder, but we need to add this one, which is the flight mode. So if we go and edit that, you can see I have changed it to mode, and the source, it selects itself, but you can go in and change the source and things. We don't need to change anything else on there. So I'm going to exit out of there, and you can see again there on channel 7, if we press enter and edit there, I've called this mix name Auto Tune, and its source is auto. So it's basically just tying everything up. So if I press exit there, okay, we're done with that screen. So if we then page up, now this is something that you have to do on the elevator for the Pixhawk, and using this setup with the X8R, you need to reverse the elevator. So if we go to channel 2 here and then press enter, and then you use the up and down arrows, you see there it says direction. You want to have it reversed on channel 2. That's the elevator, and that is just how we need to set it up for the Pixhawk. So now we have done that, we can go to page, and you can see here curves, right? So we need to have a custom curve put in, and that is because the PWM values of the switch don't match the Pixhawk perfectly. So if you go into here and create a CV1 and call it modes again, so we're just going to enter there, you can see I've changed the name to modes there. And then what we want to do is also change it to 6-position switch there, because it is a 6-position switch. Then the next thing that you want to do is on the y-axis, change all of these values exactly the same that I have. So -60, -40, -20, 10, 40, 18. You can see each time we move along, it changes that curve, okay? So once we have created that, we can press exit. And then if we long press page, we can go back to that first input menu and then go down to our switch 3. And if you press edit, we can scroll down to the custom curve and press enter and change it to CV1. Then you can see now, if we
altitude hold,
twist the knob there,
loiter,
it moves across the top.
macro, landing, stabilize.
Now mine's playing a sound there, so we'll show you how to do that. So if we press exit and exit again, so if we page forward, we've got the curves. This is the page that we are interested in, special functions. It's page number 11, okay? It's the page responsible for adding sounds to switch actions. It's the reason why I downloaded that Amber sound pack, so we can have a wider range of sounds played, and it's really easy to use. So what you want to do is tab over here. All these will be blank when you get the transmitter. I've keyed them in already. So S3 stands for switch 3, and then the one after is position 1, position 2, 3, 4, all the way to 6. And to change that, you just press enter and it starts flashing. Use the up and down keys to get your switch number. Okay, so I'm gonna exit out of there, and then I'm going to go over to this option, which you can select it to do different things, but we want it to play tracks, so I have changed it to that. And then if we move it one more, this is the sound option that you get. And if you press enter here, you can see we've got like a huge amount of sounds in here, and they are all named really nicely. So stabilize is this one. So all we do there is press enter. So the way that I've got it set up is S1 stabilize, S2 altitude hold, S3 loiter, S4 return to launch, S5 acro mode. Let's just scroll down them there. S6 landing, then S7, which is the switch 7, I've got it to auto tune, and you can see there the switch is different. That's this switch at the back here.
Auto tune.
And the reason why I've got that set up is once we've got the Pixhawk ready to go, we can get it to auto tune itself, so we don't have to mess with any PID settings, which is great. So what that now gives us is in the different flight modes, we can move the switch and it will play the sound.
Altitude hold, loiter, return to launch.
You can see it moves through the switches as well as we do it.
Acro, landing, stabilize, auto tune.
Now, it's all very well having it sound out those modes, but what you can do is go one further. So if we page forward, and you saw that page before that we skipped over, we've got flight modes here. And what that does, when you list these, if I press exit, you can see that it actually lists the mode as well, stabilize. So we change it. Altitude hold, loiter, return to launch, whatever.
Stabilize.
Okay, so if we go into the menu button and then page back to that flight mode, so you want to leave flight mode 0 blank like that and go to flight mode 1, and then you literally just change the name there. Now if you suffer from OCD, don't worry, there is a way to get a capital letter at the start, but it's not obvious. So if we press enter there, you see if you long press enter, it will change case like that. So if we enter again and long press enter, it'll change back to uppercase. Okay, so then we want to move on to the switch, and we want it to match the mode on the switch. So again, it's in order. We've got S3, 1, 2, 3, and 4 there. So you see, if I move it, it moves down as well. So you just want to set up each one of these with whatever name that you want. See, I've got stabilize, altitude hold, loiter, return to launch, acro, and land. You can have those whatever you want, and you'll see how that works later in the Pixhawk. So that's the model setup. The next thing to do is bind it to the X8R receiver. So let me introduce you to the Pixhawk flight controller and the X8R receiver. We haven't seen much of them in this video series, but that's going to change from now. So the first thing to do is connect the Pixhawk to its vibration plate. It's very important that you do that. It comes with these two sticky pads here, and you just place it on the top. Make sure that it's in the center. You also have to fix these rubber grommets, which are so difficult to attach. You'll end up hurting your fingers doing it, but you can get it done eventually. So we are just going to need two connections for now. So the first one is this one single servo lead. That connects from the S-bus port on the X8R radio in this order. So we've got the signal wire, the voltage wire, and the ground wire going in that way. I'll just move that closer so you can see it, so you get a clear view of it. And then on the Pixhawk here, on the RC input, we've got the ground on the top, the voltage next, and then the signal wire last. So that is the only cable that we're going to need to the X8R receiver. We also need this USB connector here, which is plugged into the computer. We're not going to change any settings on the Pixhawk yet, but it's going to provide power to the Pixhawk and also the receiver so that we can bind it to the transmitter. So the transmitter comes with these little jumper cables, and I didn't know what they were for at first, but they are for binding into the 4 different flight modes that you can have. This is a 16-channel receiver, despite it saying 8 there, and as we are using the S-bus connector to the Pixhawk, that does allow us to output all 16 channels through this cable. The problem with that, though, is the Pixhawk only has so many auxiliary channels. I think it's 6, but I haven't tested that yet. So we're allowed 4 channels for our flight axes. We allow 1 for our flight mode switch, so that's 5 channels, plus the 6 auxiliaries out potentially. That's only 11 channels that we can use out of this, and we've got 16, so what can we do about that? So what we can do to get by that is use the jumpers in the box to bind in different modes. Now, if you don't have these jumpers on and just bind it normally, what you have is the 16 channel output to here, but then the 8 channels on the PWM circuit here also copies those first 8 channels. So what we want is the 1 to 16 channels coming out of this wire here, but if we put these 2 jumpers here and then bind it, we're going to have 9 to 16 on these PWM inputs as well, which means we can utilize all of our channels. Okay, so let's get this thing bound. The first thing that I'm going to do is short press the menu button and then short press the page button. That brings us to the model setup page. I'm then going to press the plus button, which takes us to the bottom of this page, and then navigate to where it says bind there. Now on the receiver, I have got my 2 jumpers in place there, and we are going to need to apply power to the Pixhawk, but we also need to press the failsafe button there, which is kind of like the bind button, while it's being powered. It's quite tricky this, so you'll have to bear with me. Okay, so let's plug the power in. You can see there we've got a red and green LED that is shown up on the receiver. And then what we do is where it says bind, we press enter. And you can see there that this red light is now flashing, which means that it is bound. So what we have to do now is remove the power from it and turn the TX off as well. But we need to remove these jumpers now, which can be quite tricky. Careful you don't lose them. Okay, so if we turn the transmitter on now,
Welcome to Taranis.
and I'm going to plug this in.
Stabilize.
There you go. We have got a green light on the receiver to say that it is communicating with the transmitter. And what will actually happen is if we remove the power from this, the Taranis will recognize that, and it will say that it has lost the signal.
Telemetry lost.
Telemetry lost. One thing that you have to watch out for is this receiver is transmitting telemetry back to this one, and if they're in close range they can interfere with each other, and often this will say that it has lost the telemetry. So if you're messing about with it, just have the transmitter slightly away from the receiver and you won't have any problems. So if I connect this back up now, it should say telemetry recovered. Oh, can you see there, it's not actually binding. But I bet if I move the transmitter away slightly,
telemetry recovered.
there you go. See, it doesn't like to work in close proximity at all, so be careful of that. Now, I mentioned before that by adding the jumpers to these pins here, that we would bind the receiver to the transmitter in a mode where it allows us to have channels 1 to 16 on this cable and 9 to 16 on these PWM pins here. So let's test to see if that has worked. So what I have done, if we go into the menu and we page to the inputs page, if we scroll down here, what I have done, I have made on channel 16 the S1 knob on the transmitter link up to channel 16 there, and also if I page across again to the mixer and we go down to channel 16 and go into there and have a look at it. There, I've just called it EBB, doesn't mean anything, but it is connected to this knob up here on the transmitter. So what I'm going to be able to do now is if we exit out of there, I have this servo. Now, it recommends that you don't plug a servo and use it into the receiver using the power from the Pixhawk. However, it's going to be fine just for a test. This isn't going to go onto the aircraft whatsoever. So if we take this servo now and plug it into number 8 on here, which is channel 16. So let's put this in here. You can see the servo is moving on channel 16. So that has worked. There you go, we are done with the transmitter setup and the receiver is bound. The next thing to do is set up the Pixhawk flight controller. Thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.